The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September of 1878, and Olivia Dawson stared at it like it might bite her, the official seal of the county land office gleaming in the sunlight that streamed through her kitchen window. She had not ordered any documents, had not requested anything from the government, and yet here it was, thick parchment that spoke of property and ownership and things she had never dared to dream about since her husband Thomas died 3 years ago from pneumonia. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal, and what she read inside made her heart stop completely before it started racing like a thoroughbred at full gallop. The deed to the ranch, the sprawling 300 acres where she had worked herself to exhaustion for the past year, was made out to 2 names. Hers, Olivia Dawson, was written in elegant script. But beside it, sharing equal ownership, was another name that made her blood run cold and hot all at once. Yates Sutherland. She dropped the paper on the scarred wooden table and pressed both hands to her face, feeling the heat rise in her cheeks. Yates Sutherland was the rancher whose land bordered hers to the north, a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of spring grass, who had helped her more times than she could count over the past 12 months. He had mended her fences when winter storms tore them down. He had helped birth her calves when she could not manage alone. He had brought her supplies during the harsh winter when snow buried the roads for weeks. But never once had she asked him to put his name on her deed. Never once had she suggested they were anything more than neighbors helping each other survive in the unforgiving landscape of western Missouri. Olivia grabbed her shawl from the hook by the door and marched across the yard, her boots kicking up dust with each determined step. The morning air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the prairie grass whispered secrets as the wind swept across the open land. She could see smoke rising from the chimney of the Sutherland ranch house in the distance, a sturdy structure of wood and stone that spoke of permanence and prosperity. Her own home was smaller, more modest. The house Thomas had built with his own hands before illness claimed him at the age of 32, leaving her a widow at 25 with no children and a mountain of debt she had somehow managed to pay off through sheer determination and grueling labor. The walk to the Sutherland ranch took 20 minutes, and with every step her anger built higher. How dare he? How dare he assume she needed rescuing? She had managed on her own, had proven herself capable, and now he had gone behind her back and altered legal documents without her permission or knowledge. It was presumptuous and arrogant and completely unacceptable. She pounded on the heavy oak door with more force than necessary, and when it swung open, Yates stood there in his work clothes, his dark hair slightly damp as if he had just washed up. He was 30 years old, she knew, having heard the ranch hands mention his birthday some months back. His face showed surprise for only a moment before something else crossed his features, something that looked almost like resignation mixed with determination. "I figured you would be coming," he said quietly, stepping back to let her enter. "You figured correctly," Olivia said, her voice sharp as broken glass. She swept past him into the main room, which was furnished simply but comfortably, with a large stone fireplace and furniture that had clearly been built to last generations. She turned to face him, holding up the deed that she had clutched in her fist during the entire walk. "What is this? What have you done?" Yates closed the door and leaned against it, crossing his arms over his broad chest. He wore a blue work shirt that brought out the green in his eyes, and his expression was calm despite the storm he must have known was coming. "I put your name on my deed," he said simply. "Made us equal partners in both properties. 300 acres became 600. It is ours now." "I never asked for this," Olivia said, her voice rising despite her attempt to stay composed. I never asked for your charity or your pity or whatever this is supposed to be." "It is not charity," Yates said, his voice still steady but with an edge of steel beneath it. "And it sure as hell is not pity." "Then what is it?" she demanded, taking a step closer to him. "What gives you the right to make decisions about my property without even consulting me?" Yates pushed off from the door and walked past her to the window that looked out over the rolling prairie. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, golden grass rippling like water under the wind, dotted with cattle that grazed peacefully in the morning sun. "Your property was mortgaged to the bank again," he said quietly. "I know because I know the banker, and he mentioned it in passing 3 weeks ago. Said you took out a loan to buy breeding stock, good quality Herefords to improve your herd." Olivia felt the color drain from her face. She had indeed taken out a loan, a necessary risk to improve her chances of making the ranch profitable. But she had planned to pay it back over the next 2 years through careful management and hard work. "That is my business, not yours." "The bank was planning to call in the loan early," Yates continued, turning to face her. "There is a railroad man from back east who wants to buy up land in this area, and the bank would rather have the commission from selling your property than wait for you to pay back the loan over time. They were going to foreclose in 30 days. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and Olivia reached out to steady herself against the back of a chair. "What?" "I paid off your loan," Yates said, holding her gaze. "Paid it in full along with interest. But I did not want you to feel beholden to me, did not want you to think you owed me anything. So instead of telling you about it, I went to the county office and had both deeds redrawn. Your land is in both our names now, and my land is in both our names. We are equal partners." "You do not owe me a single thing, Olivia. It is ours, all of it." She stared at him, her mind racing to process what he was saying. "You paid off my loan and put our names on both properties without asking me." "Yes." "That is insane," she said, but her voice had lost some of its sharp edge. "That is completely insane. You barely know me." A slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I have been your neighbor for over a year. I have seen you work from dawn until dark every single day. I have watched you handle cattle that most men would be afraid of. I have seen you repair fences in the rain and deliver calves in the middle of the night and manage books by lamplight when you could barely keep your eyes open. I know exactly who you are, Olivia Dawson." "That does not give you the right," she said, but the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "Maybe not," Yates agreed, moving closer to her. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the fine lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. "But I could not stand by and watch you lose everything you have worked for. And I could not make you beholden to me by simply paying off the loan. This way we are partners, equals. You have just as much claim to this ranch as I do, and I have just as much claim to yours. It is fair." "Fair," Olivia repeated, feeling slightly hysterical. "Fair would have been discussing this with me first. Fair would have been giving me a choice. Would you have accepted my help if I asked?" Yates said, and his voice was gentle now, understanding. She opened her mouth to say yes, then closed it again. Because he was right. She would have refused. She would have insisted on handling it herself, would have worked herself into the ground trying to make enough money to satisfy the bank. She would have lost everything rather than accept what she would have seen as charity. "That is not the point," she said finally. "It is exactly the point," Yates said. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met, and I knew you would never accept help directly. So I did what I thought was right. Maybe it was not the smartest thing I have ever done, but it felt right in my gut." Olivia looked down at the deed in her hand, at the 2 names written side by side. equal ownership, equal partnership. She thought about the past year, about all the times Yates had appeared exactly when she needed help, never asking for payment or thanks, just doing what needed to be done, and then disappearing back to his own work. She thought about the way he looked at her sometimes when he did not think she was watching, like she was something precious and strong all at once. She thought about the loneliness of the past 3 years since Thomas died, the weight of carrying everything alone. Why? She asked quietly, looking up at him. Why would you do this for me? Yates was silent for a long moment, and she watched emotions play across his face, saw him weighing his words carefully. Because I care about what happens to you, he said finally. Because I respect the hell out of you and everything you have accomplished. And because I hope that maybe, if we were partners on paper, you might eventually be willing to consider being partners in other ways too. Her heart stuttered in her chest. What are you saying? I am saying that I have been half in love with you since the day you chased off those cattle rustlers with nothing but a shotgun and your own fury, Yates said, and there was color rising in his cheeks now, but his gaze remained steady on hers. I am saying that I think about you every morning when I wake up and every night before I sleep. I am saying that working beside you, even just as neighbors, has been the best part of my days for the past year. And I am saying that I want more than that, if you are willing. But I did not do this to pressure you or to force your hand. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and I would do it again even if you walk out that door right now and never speak to me again. Olivia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, unexpected and unbidden. No one had spoken to her like this since Thomas, and even then, their courtship had been practical and straightforward, nothing like the raw honesty in Yates's words. You should have told me about the bank, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know, he said. You should have asked me before changing the deeds. I know that too. This is completely improper and probably illegal and definitely the most high-handed thing anyone has ever done to me. Probably all true, Yates agreed, and now there was a slight smile playing at his lips. Olivia found herself smiling too, despite everything. I should be furious with you. Are you? He asked. She considered the question honestly, examining her feelings beneath the initial shock and anger. Was she furious? Or was she something else entirely? She thought about going back to her ranch, working it alone, always wondering if she would make it through another season. Then she thought about having a partner, someone to share the burden and the triumph, someone who saw her as an equal rather than a responsibility or a charity case. She thought about the way her heart had leaped when Yates said he cared about what happened to her, the way warmth had flooded through her entire body at his confession of feelings. No, she said finally, I am not furious. I am confused and overwhelmed, and I have no idea what to do with any of this, but I am not furious. Yates took a step closer, and now there was only a foot of space between them. You do not have to do anything with it right now, he said gently. The deeds are legal. The land is ours, both of us. We can go on exactly as we have been, neighbors helping each other, if that is what you want. Or we can explore what it might mean to be true partners. It is your choice, Olivia. I am not trying to force you into anything. Even though you already forced me into joint ownership of 600 acres, she said, but there was no heat in the words. Even though, he agreed. She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since they had become neighbors. She saw the strength in his shoulders, built from years of hard ranch work. She saw the kindness in his eyes, the patience that had allowed him to help her without making her feel weak. She saw the slight nervousness in the way he stood, as if he was braced for her to reject him completely. And she realized that maybe she had been half in love with him too, without allowing herself to acknowledge it, because admitting feelings felt like a betrayal of Thomas's memory, or an admission that she could not manage alone. "I do not know how to do this," she said honestly. "I was married for 4 years and then I was alone for 3. I do not know how to let someone in again." "We could learn together," Yates suggested. "Take it slow. No rush, no pressure. Just 2 people who happen to own a lot of land together, figuring out if they are suited for more than just partnership in ranching." Despite the emotional weight of the moment, Olivia laughed. "That might be the strangest courtship proposal I have ever heard. Is it working?" Yates asked, and there was hope in his voice that made her heart squeeze. "Maybe," she admitted, "but you have to promise me something, anything. No more making major decisions without discussing them with me first," she said firmly. "If we are going to be partners in anything, then we communicate like partners. No more going behind my back, even if you think it is for my own good." Yates nodded immediately. "You have my word. Complete honesty from here on out. And I want to see all the financial records," Olivia continued. "For both properties. If we own this land together, I need to know exactly what we are dealing with, debts and assets and everything in between." "Fair enough," Yates said. "I will get the books after we finish talking." Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. "And I think we should have dinner together. Tonight. A proper dinner where we sit down and talk like 2 people getting to know each other, not just neighbors discussing cattle prices." The smile that broke across Yates's face was like sunrise, warm and bright and full of promise. "I would like that very much. Here or at your place?" "Here," Olivia said. "I have been cooking for myself for 3 years. It would be nice to eat someone else's cooking for a change." "I should warn you that I am no great chef," Yates said. "But I make a decent stew and my biscuits are edible, according to my ranch hands." "That sounds perfect," Olivia said and realized she meant it. She looked down at the deed still clutched in her hand at their 2 names side by side. "This is really ours, all of it," Yates confirmed. 300 acres that were yours, 300 that were mine, now 600 that belong to both of us equally. The cattle, the buildings, the water rights, everything." "It is a lot of land," Olivia said softly. "It is a lot of possibility," Yates countered. 2 properties combined are stronger than 2 separate ones. We can manage resources better, breed cattle more strategically, weather bad seasons more easily. And we can do it together, not alone. Together. The word resonated through Olivia like a bell ringing clear and true. She had been alone for so long, had carried every burden by herself, had made every decision in isolation. The thought of sharing that weight, of having someone beside her rather than facing everything solo, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I should get back," she said, though she found herself reluctant to leave. "I have morning chores still to finish." "I could come help," Yates offered. "Make it go faster." "No," Olivia said, shaking her head. "I need some time to think about all of this, to let it settle. But I will be back at 6 o'clock for dinner." 6 o'clock, Yates repeated, and his smile was gentle and understanding. "I will be ready." Olivia walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. She turned back to look at him, at this man who had upended her entire world in a single morning. "Yates?" "Yes, thank you," she said quietly, "for saving my ranch, even if you went about it in the most aggravating way possible." "You are welcome," he said. "Even if I terrified you in the process." She smiled despite herself, then stepped out into the bright morning sunlight. The walk back to her ranch felt different somehow, as if the land itself had changed beneath her feet. Every fence post, every rolling hill, every blade of grass was now jointly hers and Yates's. The responsibility should have felt heavier, but instead it felt lighter, as if by sharing ownership she had somehow halved the burden rather than doubled it. When she reached her small ranch house, Olivia stood in the yard for a long moment, looking at everything with fresh eyes. The barn needed a new coat of paint. The chicken coop could use reinforcement before winter. The vegetable garden was producing its last harvest before the frost came. All of it was familiar, but now it was also different, infused with new meaning and new possibilities. She spent the rest of the day working through her chores in a daze, her mind constantly returning to the conversation with Yates, to the feel of his eyes on her, to the way her heart had responded to his words. She mucked out stalls and fed chickens and collected eggs, all while replaying every moment, every expression, every nuance of tone. He had said he was half in love with her. The declaration should have frightened her, should have sent her running in the opposite direction. Instead, it had awakened something inside her that had been dormant for years, a longing for connection and companionship that went beyond mere survival. As afternoon shifted toward evening, Olivia went inside and faced her small wardrobe with consternation. She had work dresses, and one good dress she wore to church on Sundays when she bothered to go. Nothing fancy, nothing that spoke of courtship or romance. But she could at least wear something clean and perhaps put her hair up properly instead of in the hasty braid she favored for daily work. She heated water on the stove and washed thoroughly, scrubbing away the day's grime and sweat. Then she put on her Sunday dress, a simple garment of dark blue cotton with a modest neckline and long sleeves. It was practical and plain, but it was the best she had. She unpinned her hair from its braid and brushed it out, the honey-colored waves falling past her shoulders before she pinned it up in a more elegant style than she usually bothered with. Looking at herself in the small mirror above her wash basin, Olivia barely recognized her own reflection. She looked younger somehow, less careworn, with color in her cheeks and a brightness in her brown eyes that had been absent for years. The sight startled her. When had she stopped caring about her appearance beyond basic cleanliness? When had she stopped thinking of herself as a woman instead of just a rancher fighting to survive? At 5:45, Olivia locked up her house and walked back across the prairie toward the Sutherland ranch. The sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the sky in colors that took her breath away. The temperature had dropped with the approaching night, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, grateful for its warmth. Yates must have been watching for her, because the door opened before she could knock. He had cleaned up as well, his dark hair still damp and neatly combed, wearing a white shirt that looked freshly pressed and dark trousers. The sight of him dressed up made Olivia's pulse quicken. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, and there was such sincerity in his voice that Olivia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You do not look so bad yourself," she replied, aiming for lightness to cover her sudden nervousness. Yates stepped back to let her enter, and Olivia was immediately struck by how different the house felt compared to this morning. The main room was lit by several oil lamps that cast warm, flickering light across the space. The table was set with actual china plates and silverware, not the rough tin dishes she expected from a bachelor rancher. A pot bubbled on the stove, filling the air with the rich aroma of beef stew, and there was fresh bread cooling on the counter. "You did all this?" Olivia asked, surprised. "I had some help from my cook, Rosa," Yates admitted. "She lives in town but comes out a few times a week to make sure I do not starve. I asked her to teach me how to set a proper table this afternoon. I think I got it right, but you will have to tell me if I missed anything." The thought of this strong, capable rancher asking his cook how to set a table properly made something warm bloom in Olivia's chest. "It looks perfect," she said honestly. They sat down to eat, and for the first few minutes there was awkward silence as they both focused on their food. The stew was indeed good, rich and hearty with tender chunks of beef and vegetables, and the bread was fresh and warm. Olivia realized she was genuinely hungry, having been too distracted all day to eat properly. "Tell me about how you ended up ranching," Yates said finally, breaking the silence. "I know the basic facts, but I want to hear the real story." Olivia set down her spoon and considered the question. "Thomas and I married when I was 21, she began. He had inherited a small plot of land from his father and had big dreams of building it into a successful ranch. I grew up in St. Louis, the daughter of a shopkeeper, and I had no idea what I was getting into when I agreed to come west with him." "Was it hard?" Yates asked, his attention fully focused on her. "Harder than I could have imagined," Olivia said honestly. "I had never worked outside a day in my life, never handled livestock, never dealt with weather that could kill you if you were not careful. But Thomas was patient with me, taught me everything he knew. And I discovered I had a knack for it, for the work and the lifestyle. I loved the land, the openness, the sense of building something meaningful. And then he died," Yates said softly. Olivia nodded, feeling the familiar ache of loss that had dulled over time but never completely disappeared. Pneumonia took him in the winter of '75. He got caught in a snowstorm checking on cattle and was soaked through by the time he made it home. The fever set in fast, and there was nothing the doctor could do. He was gone within a week. "I am sorry," Yates said, and she could hear the genuine sympathy in his voice. "So was I," Olivia said. "For a long time, I was just angry. Angry at him for dying, angry at the world for being so unfair, angry at myself for not being able to save him. But eventually, the anger faded and I was left with a choice. I could sell the ranch and go back to St. Louis, back to my old life. Or I could stay and make Thomas's dream a reality." "You stayed," Yates observed. "I stayed," Olivia confirmed. "Because by then, it was not just Thomas's dream anymore. It was mine too. I had put my blood and sweat and tears into this land, and I was not going to let it go without a fight. So I learned everything I did not already know. I learned how to manage finances and negotiate with buyers and handle disputes with neighboring ranchers. I made mistakes, plenty of them, but I learned from each one, and slowly I made it work." Yates was quiet for a moment, studying her across the table. "That takes incredible strength," he said finally. "Most people would have given up." "I thought about it," Olivia admitted. "There were days when I wanted nothing more than to just walk away from all of it. But I had promised Thomas I would make something of this land, and I keep my promises. Even promises to the dead," Yates said, and it was not a question. "Especially promises to the dead," Olivia said. "They are the only kind you can never take back or apologize for breaking." They continued eating, but the atmosphere had shifted into something more comfortable, the initial awkwardness giving way to genuine conversation. Yates told her about his own history, how he had come to Missouri from Texas 5 years ago with money saved from working cattle drives and a desire to build something permanent. He had purchased the land and built the ranch from the ground up, working alongside hired hands to create a thriving operation. "I always thought I would do it with someone," Yates said as he cleared their empty plates. "Build something with a partner, a wife. But I never met anyone who seemed to fit until you moved in next door." "I was already here," Olivia pointed out. "You moved in next to me." "Semantics," Yates said with a grin. "The point is, once I met you, no one else seemed interesting anymore." Olivia felt her heart beat faster. "You hit it well. I had no idea you felt that way." "I was trying to be respectful," Yates said, bringing over coffee and 2 slices of apple pie that Rosa had apparently also provided. "You were grieving and you were focused on your ranch. I did not want to complicate your life or make you uncomfortable. So I just helped when I could and tried not to be obvious about the fact that I looked forward to every interaction we had. I looked forward to them too, Olivia confessed, surprised by her own honesty. I told myself it was just because you were helpful, but I think it was more than that. I think I was lonely, and you filled that emptiness without me even realizing it was happening. They moved to the sitting area after finishing dessert, settling into comfortable chairs near the fireplace, where a small fire crackled pleasantly. The conversation flowed more easily now, ranging from practical matters like breeding strategies for their combined herds to more personal topics like favorite books and childhood memories. Olivia learned that Yates had two sisters back in Texas who wrote him long letters full of family gossip. Yates learned that Olivia missed the theater performances she had enjoyed in St. Louis, but loved the open sky of the prairie more than any building man could construct. As the evening grew late, Olivia realized with a start that she had not thought about work or worry or any of her usual concerns for hours. She had simply enjoyed being present, talking with someone who genuinely listened and cared about what she had to say. The realization was both wonderful and slightly terrifying. I should go, she said reluctantly, noting that full darkness had fallen outside. Early morning tomorrow. I will walk you home, Yates said immediately, standing and reaching for his hat and coat. You do not have to do that, Olivia protested, even as warmth flooded through her at his protectiveness. I want to, Yates said simply. Humor me. They walked back across the prairie together under a sky brilliant with stars, the Milky Way stretching overhead like a river of light. The night air was cold but not uncomfortable, and Olivia found herself walking close to Yates, close enough that their arms occasionally brushed. Thank you for tonight, she said as they approached her house. For dinner and conversation and all of it. Thank you for giving me a chance, Yates replied. I know this morning was a shock, and you had every right to stay angry. I might still be a little angry, Olivia admitted, but I am also grateful and confused and maybe a little bit hopeful about what comes next. They stopped at her porch, facing each other in the dim light spilling from her windows. Yates looked down at her with an expression that made her breath catch. Can I see you again? Not just as neighbors or business partners, but like this? I would like that, Olivia said softly. Tomorrow night, Yates suggested. I could come to your place, bring supplies for dinner so you do not have to cook. Tomorrow night, Olivia agreed. For a moment she thought he might try to kiss her, and she was not entirely sure how she would respond. But Yates simply reached out and gently squeezed her hand, a gesture of affection and promise without pushing for more than she was ready to give. Good night, Olivia, he said quietly. Good night, Yates, she replied. She watched him walk back toward his ranch, a tall figure gradually swallowed by darkness, before going inside and closing the door. The house felt emptier than usual, and she realized with a start that she was already looking forward to seeing him again tomorrow. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it filled her with a quiet joy that carried her through her bedtime routine and into dreams that were warmer and more hopeful than any she had experienced in years. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and growing connection. True to his word, Yates came to dinner the following night, and then Olivia went to his place 2 nights after that. They established a rhythm of shared meals 3 or 4 times a week, alternating between their 2 houses. During the day, they worked their respective properties, but found excuses to help each other, collaborating on projects that benefited their combined holdings. Olivia gradually relaxed into the reality of joint ownership, reviewing the financial records, as Yates had promised, and discovering that their combined resources really did make both ranches stronger. They made decisions together about purchasing new breeding stock, about which fields to rotate cattle through, about repairs and improvements. Yates never made a move without consulting her first, honoring his promise completely. But it was not just the business partnership that deepened. With every shared meal, every long conversation, every moment of working side by side, Olivia felt herself falling for Yates in a way that was entirely different from what she had experienced with Thomas. Her first marriage had been built on practicality and companionship, a solid foundation but not necessarily a passionate one. With Yates, she felt a pull that was both emotional and physical, a desire for his presence that went beyond mere partnership. Yates seemed to feel the same way. She caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her skin feel warm. When he helped her dismount from her horse, his hands would linger at her waist a moment longer than necessary. When they sat together in the evening, he would find reasons to touch her, a hand on her shoulder, fingers brushing hers, small gestures that spoke of growing desire held carefully in check. It was late October when things shifted between them again. Olivia had been helping Yates repair a section of fence that had been damaged by a fallen tree during a storm. The work was hard and physical, requiring them to dig new post holes and wrestle heavy timber into place. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and they were both exhausted, sweaty, and covered in dirt. "Come inside," Yates said, wiping his forehead with his sleeve. "Wash up and stay for dinner. I am too tired to walk you home and back tonight." "I can walk myself," Olivia protested, though she was indeed exhausted. "I know you can," Yates said, "but I would rather you stayed. Besides, Rosa left enough stew for an army and I am not going to eat it all myself." Olivia hesitated, aware that staying late into the evening was one thing, but staying overnight would be quite another in terms of propriety. Then again, they owned the land together. They were partners. Who would judge them? "All right," she agreed, "but I need to wash up properly. I am filthy." "There is a tub in the back room," Yates said. "I will heat water for you while I clean up at the pump." 20 minutes later, Olivia was luxuriating in hot water, her sore muscles slowly relaxing as the grime of the day soaked away. She had not had a proper hot bath in weeks, usually making do with quick washes at her basin. This felt like pure decadence. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a robe that Yates had left for her, her work clothes were gone, replaced by a clean shirt and pair of trousers that were clearly his. "I put your dress in to soak," Yates called from the other room. "Figured you would want it clean for tomorrow. Those will have to do for tonight." Olivia pulled on the borrowed clothes, having to roll up the sleeves and pant legs considerably. The shirt smelled like Yates, like leather and horses, and something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken. She emerged from the back room to find him setting the table, his hair damp from his own washing, wearing clean clothes. "You look ridiculous in my clothes," he said with a grin. "They are comfortable, though," Olivia admitted, sitting down. "Much better than corsets and petticoats." They ate dinner and talked about nothing in particular, comfortable in each other's presence in a way that felt natural and right. Afterward, they sat together on the sofa near the fireplace, and Yates tentatively put his arm around her shoulders. Olivia leaned into him without thinking, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I like this," she said quietly. "Being here with you. It feels right." "It does," Yates agreed, his voice rumbling through his chest. "It feels like this is how things were always meant to be." Olivia tilted her head back to look up at him, and suddenly they were very close, his face only inches from hers. She could see every detail, the small scar, the green eyes darkened with emotion, the way his breath caught slightly. "Yates," she whispered, Not entirely sure what she was asking for, he understood anyway. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with infinite gentleness. "Tell me to stop if this is not what you want," he said, his voice rough. "I do not want you to stop," Olivia said, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, a question more than a demand. But when Olivia responded, parting her lips and reaching up to thread her fingers through his hair, it deepened into something more passionate. Yates pulled her closer, and she went willingly, pressing against him and pouring 3 years of loneliness and longing into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the day you told off Johnson for trying to buy your land at half its value." Olivia laughed breathlessly. "That was months ago." "I know," Yates said. "I have been very patient." "Maybe too patient," Olivia suggested, and kissed him again. They stayed on the sofa for a long time, kissing and talking in whispers, exploring this new physical dimension of their relationship with careful respect for each other's boundaries. When Olivia finally fell asleep, her head on Yates's shoulder, he carried her to his bed and tucked her in before settling into a chair beside her, unwilling to presume more than she was ready to give. Olivia woke in the early morning light, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she was. She looked over to see Yates asleep in the chair, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, his long legs stretched out in front of him. The sight filled her with such tenderness that tears pricked at her eyes. He had given her his bed and taken the chair, respecting her even while she slept. She got up quietly and covered him with a blanket, then went to the kitchen to start coffee. By the time Yates woke, stiff and groaning from his uncomfortable night, she had breakfast cooking and was dressed in her own clothes, which had dried by the fire overnight. "You should have woken me," he said, stretching with audible pops from his spine. "I would have made breakfast." "You gave me your bed," Olivia said. "I can make you breakfast." They ate together as the sun rose, painting the prairie in shades of gold and rose. It felt domestic and right, like something they had been doing for years instead of this being the first time. "Olivia," Yates said as she prepared to leave for her own ranch and the day's work. "Last night meant everything to me. I hope it meant something to you, too." "It did," she assured him, reaching up to kiss him gently. "It meant everything." November brought the first real cold of winter, and with it came new challenges that tested their partnership in different ways. A pack of wolves started harassing their cattle, and they had to work together to track and drive off the predators without killing them if possible, both believing in coexisting with nature when feasible. Then an early blizzard struck, dumping 2 feet of snow across the prairie, and forcing them to combine efforts to keep their herds fed and safe. Olivia found herself spending more and more time at the Sutherland ranch house, simply because it was closer to where they were working. It became easier to stay over than to trudge through snow back to her own place. Yates never pressured her, but the sleeping arrangements gradually shifted from him taking the chair to them, sharing the bed with careful space between them, to finally sleeping curled together, finding warmth and comfort in each other's presence. It was during one of these cold nights, lying in Yates's arms with wind howling outside, that Olivia realized she had completely fallen in love with him. The realization did not come with fear or guilt about Thomas's memory. Instead, it felt like coming home, like finding a piece of herself she had not even known was missing. "Yates," she whispered into the darkness. His voice was sleepy content. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. She felt him go very still, and then he shifted so he could look at her face in the dim moonlight filtering through the window. "Say that again," he requested, his voice intense. "I love you," Olivia repeated, more confidently this time. I think I have been falling in love with you since the day you gave me half your ranch without asking anything in return. Yates kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of emotion. I love you too, he said against her lips. God, Olivia, I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Then maybe we should do something about that terror, Olivia suggested, emboldened by the darkness and the warmth of his embrace. What did you have in mind? Yates asked, his hands moving over her back in slow, deliberate strokes. Marry me, Olivia said, and then laughed at the surprise on his face. Or let me marry you, however that works. That is supposed to be my line, Yates protested, but he was grinning widely. Well, you were taking too long, Olivia said, and I am not a patient woman. No, you are definitely not, Yates agreed and kissed her again. Yes, Olivia Dawson, I will marry you, or let you marry me, however that works. They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in Clifton Hill, the closest town to their combined ranch. Rosa and the ranch hands served as witnesses, along with a few townspeople who had become friends over the years. Olivia wore a new dress of deep green that brought out the gold in her hair, and Yates wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothes but impossibly handsome. The preacher conducted the brief ceremony in the town's small church, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Olivia with such tenderness that several people in the congregation sniffled into handkerchiefs. Afterward, they held a modest reception at the town's hotel, with food and dancing and genuine celebration. As Olivia danced with her new husband, she caught sight of their reflection in one of the hotel's windows. They looked happy, she realized. They looked like they belonged together, like this had been inevitable from the moment Yates put her name on the deed without asking. What are you thinking about? Yates murmured in her ear. That you were right, Olivia admitted. About the deed, about us, about all of it. You were right to make that decision without asking me because I would have said no, and I would have missed out on all of this. I am always right, Yates said solemnly, then yelped when she stepped deliberately on his foot, or maybe not always. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, finally coming together completely as husband and wife. Yates was gentle and patient, ensuring Olivia's comfort and pleasure above all else. In the morning, they woke tangled together, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, and Olivia felt a contentment so profound it almost frightened her. We should get back to the ranch, Yates said reluctantly. The hands are capable, but I do not like leaving things too long. Our ranch, Olivia corrected, running her hand over his bare chest. It is our ranch now, officially in every way. Our ranch, Yates agreed, catching her hand and kissing her palm. Our life, our future. They returned home that afternoon to find everything running smoothly in their absence. The cattle were fed, the building secure against the winter cold, and there was fresh bread and stew waiting for them, courtesy of Rosa, who had somehow managed to be both at their wedding and at the ranch preparing for their return. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Olivia officially moved into the main ranch house, and they turned her original house into quarters for the ranch foreman and his family. Working together daily, they discovered strengths in each other that complemented perfectly. Olivia had a gift for managing finances and planning for the future, while Yates excelled at the physical work and understanding animal behavior. Together, they made decisions that strengthened their operation and increased their prosperity. Winter deepened, and there were challenges. A severe cold snap killed several head of cattle despite their best efforts. A fire started in one of the outbuildings and required all hands to prevent it from spreading. Yates caught a bad cold that left him bedridden for a week, and Olivia discovered that caring for a sick husband was both frustrating and deeply satisfying. But there were joys too. Long evenings spent by the fire, reading aloud to each other from books ordered from St. Louis. The first time Yates taught Olivia to dance properly in their living room, with no music except what they hummed together. The morning, Olivia woke feeling nauseous and realized with a mixture of joy and terror that she might be pregnant. "Yates," she said that evening as they prepared for bed, "I think I need to see the doctor." His face went white. "Are you ill? What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Olivia said quickly, then smiled. "At least, I hope nothing is wrong. I think I might be expecting a baby." The expression on Yates's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy in the space of 3 seconds. "A baby," he repeated as if he had never heard the word before. "A baby," Olivia confirmed. "Or at least I think so. I need the doctor to confirm it." Yates crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "A baby," he said again, and this time there was wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby." The doctor confirmed the pregnancy a week later, estimating that the baby would arrive in late August of 1879. Olivia was healthy, the pregnancy progressing normally, and there was no cause for concern beyond the usual risks that came with childbirth on the frontier. Yates became simultaneously more protective and more amazed as the months passed, and Olivia's belly grew. He tried to prevent her from doing any physical work, which led to their first real argument as a married couple when Olivia informed him that she was pregnant, not an invalid, and would continue to contribute to running the ranch as long as she was able. "I am not trying to treat you like you are helpless," Yates protested. "I just want to keep you safe." "I know," Olivia said, softening slightly, "but I need to feel useful. I need to be part of this operation, not just someone sitting inside waiting for a baby to arrive. You have to trust that I know my own limits." They compromised, with Olivia continuing to handle the financial records and planning while reducing her physical work as her pregnancy advanced. Yates took over more of the daily ranch operations, but he always consulted with her before making any significant decisions, honoring their partnership even as their roles temporarily shifted. Spring came with new calves and new hope. The winter had been harsh, but they had survived it, and their combined herds were thriving. Olivia spent her days preparing for the baby's arrival, setting up a nursery in one of the spare bedrooms with a cradle that Yates built himself and linens that Rosa helped her sew. In late May, a circuit judge came through Clifton Hill, and with him came news that the railroad man who had wanted to buy up land in their area had been arrested for fraud back east. The bank would no longer be calling in loans early or pressuring ranchers to sell. The threat that had prompted Yates to combine their properties in the first place was gone, dissolved like morning mist. "We could separate the properties again," Olivia said that evening, though the thought made her heart hurt. "Go back to how things were before." Yates looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Why in God's name would we do that?" "Because the original reason you combined them is gone," Olivia said. "The threat is over. The original reason I combined them was because I loved you and wanted an excuse to be part of your life," Yates said firmly. "The bank threat was just the catalyst. I would have found another reason if that one had not existed. And even if I had not, even if we had never gotten together, I would not take your name off that deed now. We built this together. It is ours, Olivia. It will always be ours." Olivia felt tears sting her eyes, which happened embarrassingly often these days thanks to pregnancy emotions. "I love you," she said. "Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour or so," Yates said, pulling her into his arms as carefully as he always did now, mindful of her swollen belly. "But I never get tired of hearing it." Summer arrived with heat and humidity that made Olivia's pregnancy increasingly uncomfortable. She grew large and unwieldy, unable to see her own feet and constantly needing to sit down. Yates treated her like precious cargo, helping her in and out of chairs, bringing her cool water, fanning her when the heat grew oppressive. On a sweltering August afternoon, Olivia's water broke while she was reviewing the account books at the kitchen table. Yates had been outside working with the horses, and the ranch hand who ran to fetch him later reported that he had never seen a man move so fast in his entire life. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the afternoon and into the night. The doctor, summoned from town, set up in their bedroom and coached Olivia through the contractions while Yates paced in the hallway, forbidden from the birthing room by convention but refusing to go any farther from his wife. At 3 in the morning on August 23, 1879, Olivia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The moment the doctor placed the crying, red-faced infant in her arms, Olivia felt a rush of love so powerful it eclipsed everything she had ever experienced before. This tiny person, this perfect combination of her and Yates, was theirs. Their son. Their family. Yates was allowed in once the doctor finished his work, and the sight of him seeing his son for the first time was something Olivia knew she would remember forever. He approached the bed like he was in church, his eyes wide and his face filled with awe. When he carefully took the baby in his large, work-roughened hands, the infant looked impossibly small and fragile. "He is perfect," Yates whispered, running one finger gently over the baby's cheek. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Olivia asked, exhausted but happy. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but had not made a final decision. Now, looking at their son, Olivia knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said softly. "For my first husband, who gave me the ranch that brought me to you, Thomas Sutherland." Yates looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Are you sure? I do not want you to feel like you have to honor him for my sake." "I am sure," Olivia said. "Thomas gave me the foundation that allowed me to survive on my own. But you gave me partnership and love and a future. Our son should carry both legacies." "Thomas Sutherland," Yates repeated, testing the name. Then he smiled. "Tommy, we will call him Tommy." The baby, as if recognizing his name, opened his eyes and looked directly at his father. The moment stretched, father and son regarding each other for the first time, and Olivia felt her heart expand to hold this new, overwhelming love. The months after Tommy's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding, and the steep learning curve of first-time parenthood. Yates proved to be a devoted father, taking his turn walking with Tommy when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, and singing off-key lullabies that somehow always soothed their son to sleep. Rosa was an invaluable help, teaching Olivia the practical aspects of caring for an infant that her St. Louis upbringing had never included. The ranch hands proved surprisingly gentle with the baby, taking turns holding him and making ridiculous faces to elicit his first smiles. As Tommy grew from infant to toddler, he became the center of their world while they continued to build their ranching empire. By his second birthday, the Sutherland Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region, known for quality cattle and fair dealings. They had expanded their holdings by purchasing another adjacent property, bringing their total acreage to nearly 1,000. But they never forgot where they started. The original deeds, both properties in both their names, hung framed in their bedroom as a reminder of the unconventional beginning of their partnership. Olivia looked at them sometimes and marveled at how her life had changed from that September morning when she had opened an unexpected letter. On a fall evening in 1881, they sat together on their porch watching Tommy play in the yard, chasing chickens and laughing with pure childhood joy. Olivia was pregnant again, due in the spring, and they had recently learned that this time they were expecting a daughter. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked suddenly. "The way we started, me making that decision without asking you." Olivia considered the question seriously, as she always did when Yates asked her something important. "No," she said finally. "I regret that you had to go behind my back because I was too stubborn to accept help. But I do not regret the outcome. Everything good in my life came from that decision you made." "Not everything," Yates protested. "You worked for all of this. You built this life." "We built it," Olivia corrected. "Together. That is what you gave me, Yates. Not charity, not pity, but partnership. You showed me that being strong does not mean facing everything alone. It means having someone beside you who sees you as an equal and loves you anyway." Yates reached over and took her hand, threading their fingers together. "It is ours," he said softly, echoing the words he had spoken that first morning years ago. "All of it. The land, the ranch, our son, our daughter coming soon. It is ours, Olivia. It will always be ours." "Ours," Olivia agreed, squeezing his hand and watching their son play in the golden light of sunset. "Always ours." Their daughter, Rose, was born in April of 1882, and she completed their family in ways Olivia had not known were possible. While Tommy was sturdy and adventurous, always climbing and exploring, Rose was gentle and observant, watching the world with serious blue eyes that were the exact shade of her father's. The years rolled by, marked by the rhythm of seasons and the growth of their children. Tommy learned to ride almost before he could walk properly, showing a natural affinity for horses that made Yates beam with pride. Rose preferred the quieter aspects of ranch life, helping her mother in the garden and learning to read earlier than any child in the county. In 1885, when Tommy was 6 and Rose was 3, they welcomed another son, Samuel. And 2 years after that, their final child arrived, a daughter named Grace. Their family was complete, and the ranch house that had once seemed too large for just Yates now rang with the sounds of children laughing, arguing, playing, and learning. Olivia and Yates grew into their roles as parents and partners with the same dedication they had brought to ranching. They taught their children the value of hard work, but also the importance of compassion and fairness. They made sure all their children, daughters and sons alike, learned to ride and rope and manage cattle, believing that everyone should understand the work that sustained them. But they also made sure their children understood more than just ranching. They ordered books from back east and taught all 4 children to read and write fluently. They discussed current events and encouraged questions and debate. They wanted their children to have choices, to be able to run the ranch if they chose, but to also have the education to pursue other paths if they desired. As the children grew, so did the ranch's reputation and success. By 1890, the Sutherland operation was legendary throughout Missouri and beyond. They had pioneered new breeding techniques, introduced quality bloodlines, and maintained strict ethical standards that other ranchers tried to emulate. But they never forgot their roots, never forgot the struggling widow and the determined rancher who had joined forces on a deed before they ever joined hearts. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates gave Olivia a gift that brought tears to her eyes. It was a painting, commissioned from an artist in St. Louis, showing the prairie that made up their ranch. But it was not just the land he had captured. In the painting, 2 figures stood in the foreground, a man and a woman side by side, facing the horizon together. And an elegant script at the bottom were the words that had defined their entire relationship. "It's ours." "I wanted you to have a reminder," Yates said as Olivia stared at the painting, overwhelmed with emotion. of the day this all started. The day I took the biggest risk of my life and hoped you would not kill me for it. It was a good risk, Olivia said, turning to embrace her husband. At 36, she was more beautiful to him than ever, her face marked with smile lines and her body softened by bearing 4 children. The best risk either of us ever took. I love you, Yates said, kissing her gently. I have loved you since before I had any right to, and I will love you until the day I die. And probably after that too, knowing you, Olivia teased, but her eyes were wet with happy tears. Tommy, now 11 and old enough to understand romance even if he found it embarrassing, groaned from the doorway. Are you two being mushy again? Rose says dinner is ready and we are all starving. They went in to dinner. Their 4 children gathered around a table that had been extended multiple times to accommodate their growing family. As Olivia looked around at their faces, at Yates at the head of the table and their children chattering about their day, she felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what Yates had given her when he put her name on that deed. Not just land or financial security, but family. Partnership. Love. A future that was richer than she had ever imagined possible during those dark days after Thomas died. He had seen her struggling alone and had found a way to help that preserved her dignity and independence while offering her everything she needed. As the years continued to pass, their partnership only grew stronger. They faced droughts and floods, disease outbreaks among the cattle, and the changing economics of ranching as the frontier gradually became less wild. Through it all, they stood together, making decisions jointly and supporting each other through both triumphs and disasters. Tommy grew into a fine young man, eventually marrying the daughter of a neighboring rancher and taking over the day-to-day operation of the cattle business. Rose surprised everyone by declaring her intention to study medicine, and she left for college in St. Louis at 18, the first woman from their county to pursue such an education. Samuel proved to have a gift for breeding horses, establishing a side business that became nearly as successful as the cattle operation. And Grace, the youngest, showed every sign of following in her father's footsteps as a natural leader and gifted rancher. By the time Olivia and Yates reached their 20th anniversary in 1898, they were grandparents 3 times over, with Tommy and his wife having blessed them with 2 grandsons and a granddaughter. The ranch had expanded to nearly 1,500 acres, employing dozens of workers and contributing significantly to the local economy. But none of that mattered as much as the quiet moments they still shared, sitting together on their porch in the evening, watching the sun set over land that they had built together. Olivia was 46 now, her hair touched with gray. Yates was 50, his face deeply lined from decades of sun and wind. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they had been that first morning, the determined widow and the audacious rancher who had bet everything on a future together. "Do you remember the day you opened that letter?" Yates asked one evening, voicing thoughts that often crossed both their minds. "Every detail," Olivia said. "I was so angry I could barely see straight. I marched over here ready to skin you alive." "You should have," Yates said with a chuckle. "I deserved it for the presumption." "No," Olivia said thoughtfully. "You deserved credit for seeing what I was too stubborn to admit, that I needed help, that partnership was not weakness, that love was still possible even after loss. You gave me just as much," Yates said. "You gave me purpose and partnership, and a reason to build something bigger than just a successful ranch. You gave me a family and a future and love I did not know I was capable of feeling." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. In the distance, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carried on the evening breeze. The land stretched around them, fertile and prosperous, testament to decades of hard work and partnership. "It is ours," Yates said softly, repeating the words that had become their personal creed. "All of this. Everything we built, everyone we love, it is ours, Olivia, and it always will be." "Ours," Olivia echoed, squeezing his hand and resting her head on his shoulder. "Forever ours." The years that followed brought more joy and some sorrow, as life always does. They lost Rosa, who had been such a help in those early years, to old age. They celebrated Tommy's 30th birthday and watched him become the kind of rancher his parents could be proud of. They welcomed Rose home from medical school, where she had graduated with honors, and returned to set up the first proper medical practice in Clifton Hill. Samuel married a girl from town and continued to expand the horse breeding operation. Grace proved to be every bit as capable as her brothers, managing portions of the ranch with skill and authority that made her parents proud. In 1905, Olivia and Yates celebrated their 27th anniversary with all 4 of their children present, along with 7 grandchildren and a household full of laughter and love. Looking around at the gathering, Olivia was struck by how much had grown from that single decision Yates had made so many years ago. Not just a successful ranch, but a dynasty. Not just a business partnership, but a love that had shaped multiple generations. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was quiet, Olivia and Yates lay together in the bed they had shared for nearly 3 decades. Her head rested on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, a sound that had become as familiar to her as her own breathing. "I want you to know something," Olivia said into the darkness, "in case I do not get another chance to say it properly." "You will have plenty of chances," Yates protested, his arm tightening around her. "We have years left together." "Maybe," Olivia said, "but I want to say it anyway. That day you put my name on the deed, you saved me. Not just from losing the ranch, but from losing myself. I was so focused on surviving alone that I had forgotten how to truly live. You reminded me what it meant to have a partner, to build something together, to love and be loved. You gave me back my life, Yates, and I will never stop being grateful for that." "You saved me too," Yates said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was building a successful ranch, but I was lonely and I did not even realize it until you came into my life. You taught me what real partnership looks like, showed me that strength comes in many forms, and you gave me a family I treasure more than anything else in this world. We saved each other, Olivia. That is what partners do." They held each other in the darkness, 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, even before they knew they needed it. The ranch continued around them, the land they had built together, the legacy they would leave to their children and grandchildren. But in that moment, none of that mattered as much as the simple fact of their connection, the love that had started with a presumptuous act of faith and had grown into something neither could have imagined. As they both drifted toward sleep, Olivia thought once more about that September morning in 1878, about the letter that had changed everything. If someone had told her then where that deed would lead, she would never have believed them. But she was grateful for every moment, every challenge, every triumph. She was grateful for the man who had looked at a struggling widow and had seen not a charity case but a partner. She was grateful for the audacity of putting her name on a deed without asking, because that single act had given her everything. "Ours," she whispered one more time, the word a prayer and a promise and a perfect summary of everything they had built together. "Always ours," Yates murmured back, and they slept peacefully, 2 hearts beating in rhythm, surrounded by the life they had created together on the wild Missouri prairie. The years continued their steady march forward, bringing change and challenge as they always do. By 1910, the wild frontier of their youth had transformed into something more settled, more civilized. Automobiles occasionally appeared on the roads alongside horses and wagons. Telephone lines were being strung between towns, connecting communities in ways that would have seemed like magic in 1878. The world was changing, but some things remained constant. The Sutherland Ranch continued to thrive under the combined leadership of Yates, Olivia, and their eldest son Tommy. But as Yates approached his 60th birthday and Olivia her 56th, they began to slowly step back from the day-to-day operations, content to offer advice and wisdom while letting the next generation take primary control. It was a warm June evening in 1912 when Yates suggested they take a ride together, just the two of them, out to the original boundary where his land had met hers all those years ago. The fence line had long since been removed. The two properties merged so completely that there was no physical evidence they had ever been separate. But they both remembered exactly where the division had been. They rode slowly, in no particular hurry, enjoying the evening air and the familiar landscape. At 62, Yates still sat a horse well, though his movements were slower and more careful than they had once been. Olivia, at 58, was still vital and healthy, though her hair was now more silver than honey-colored, and her hands showed the wear of decades of hard work. When they reached the spot where the old fence line had been, they dismounted and stood together, looking out over the land that stretched in all directions. 600 acres had become 1,500, the combined properties growing through careful management and strategic acquisition. But it was still theirs, jointly owned and operated, just as it had been from that first surprising deed. "You ever think about how different things would be if I had not been so presumptuous?" Yates asked, voicing a question he had wondered about many times over the years. "All the time," Olivia admitted. "I think about what would have happened if you had simply paid off my loan and told me about it. I would have insisted on paying you back, probably would have worked myself sick trying to do it quickly. We might never have gotten together at all. Or if I had courted you properly first, asked you to marry me before combining the properties," Yates mused. "I would have said no," Olivia said with certainty. "I was too stubborn, too convinced I had to manage alone. The only way you could have helped me was by doing it in a way that made refusal impossible while preserving my dignity, and somehow you understood that without me ever saying it." "I took a hell of a gamble," Yates said, "but it paid off," Olivia pointed out. "Look what we built from that gamble. 4 children, 7 grandchildren, a successful ranch that will support our family for generations, and most importantly, 34 years of partnership and love that has made every day richer than the one before." Yates turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Even after all these years, the touch of his hands on hers still made her heart flutter slightly. "If I had it to do over again," he said seriously, "I would not change a single thing. Every choice I made, every risk I took, led me to you and to this life. I would walk the same path 1,000 times." "So would I," Olivia said, rising on her toes to kiss him gently. "Though I might have been slightly less angry when I read that first deed." They both laughed, the sound carrying across the prairie grass that whispered its own secrets to the wind. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they remounted their horses and rode back toward home, toward the house where their family waited, toward the life they had built from faith and presumption and love. The Sutherland Ranch continued to prosper through the years that followed. Tommy proved to be an excellent manager, implementing new techniques while respecting the traditions his parents had established. Rose's medical practice brought health care to the region that saved countless lives. Samuel's horse breeding operation gained national recognition, and Grace eventually married a neighboring rancher, expanding the family's influence and connections throughout the region. By the time Olivia and Yates celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1918, they were great-grandparents, with the youngest generation carrying on the family legacy. The ranch had grown to over 2,000 acres, and the Sutherland name was synonymous with quality, integrity, and fair dealing throughout Missouri and beyond. But more than the material success, what mattered most was the family they had created. Every Sunday, when children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered for dinner, the table extending the length of the dining room to accommodate everyone, Olivia and Yates would look at each other and marvel at what had grown from that single audacious act of putting two names on a deed. The original document still hung in their bedroom, the paper yellowed with age but the names still clear. Olivia Dawson and Yates Sutherland, equal partners in ownership of land that had become so much more than just property. It had become legacy, family, and a testament to what partnership could achieve. As Yates grew older, his health began to decline in ways that worried Olivia despite her attempts to hide her concern. He developed a persistent cough that the doctors could not quite cure, and his energy levels decreased noticeably. But his spirit remained strong, and his love for Olivia never wavered for a single moment. On a crisp October morning in 1920, Yates woke early and asked Olivia to walk with him one more time to the old boundary line between their original properties. Something in his tone made her agree without question, and they set out together on foot, moving slowly to accommodate his reduced strength. When they reached the spot, Yates stopped and pulled Olivia close, holding her with the same tenderness he had shown on their wedding day 42 years earlier. "I want you to know something," he said quietly. "Every day I have spent with you has been a gift. Every morning I woke up beside you. Every evening we watched the sunset together. Every moment of laughter and even the tears, all of it has been perfect because it was with you." "Yates," Olivia said, fear clutching at her heart because his words sounded too much like goodbye. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," he assured her, though they both knew that was not entirely true. "I just want to make sure you know how grateful I am for the life we built together. How proud I am of the woman you have always been, strong and capable and loving. How honored I am that you chose to share your life with me." "You are talking like you are leaving," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face now. "Like this is the end." "Not the end," Yates said gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Just an acknowledgement that we do not get forever, no matter how much we might want it. But whatever time we have left, whether it is 1 day or 20 years, I want you to know that every moment has been worth everything." They stood there together for a long time, holding each other as the sun climbed higher in the sky and the prairie grass swayed around them. Eventually, they walked back to the house hand in hand, neither willing to let go of the connection that had sustained them for so long. Yates's health continued to decline gradually over the following years, but his determination to stay active and involved in the ranch operations never wavered. Olivia watched over him with fierce protectiveness, bullying him into resting when necessary and celebrating small victories when he felt stronger. Their children and grandchildren rallied around them, providing support while respecting the deep partnership that had always defined their relationship. In the spring of 1925, as wildflowers bloomed across the prairie and new calves frolicked in the fields, Yates Sutherland passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75. Olivia was beside him, as she had been for 47 years, holding his hand and whispering words of love as he took his final breath. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, from family members to ranch hands to townspeople whose lives had been touched by Yates's generosity and integrity. But what Olivia remembered most was standing at the graveside, looking out over the land they had built together, and feeling his presence so strongly it was as if he stood beside her still. In the months that followed, Olivia grieved deeply, but not despairingly. She knew that what she and Yates had shared was rare and precious, and she was grateful for every moment rather than bitter about what had been lost. She continued to be involved in the ranch operations, though she left most of the actual management to Tommy and his children. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the unconventional way their grandparents had gotten together. On what would have been their 50th anniversary, Olivia rode out alone to the old boundary line. She was 71 now, her body showing the wear of a long and active life, but her spirit was still strong. She stood in the spot where she and Yates had shared so many meaningful conversations and looked out over the land that bore their joint legacy. "It is still ours," she said aloud, speaking to the man who was no longer there but who she felt all around her in the wind and the grass and the wide open sky. "Everything we built, everyone we loved, all of it is still ours, and it always will be, my love. Forever and always it is ours." The wind seemed to whisper an answer, and Olivia smiled through her tears. She knew that the story she and Yates had created together would live on through their children and grandchildren, and all the generations that would follow. The ranch would continue, the family would grow, and the legacy of two names on a deed would endure as a testament to the power of partnership and love. Olivia lived for another 8 years, healthy and active until the very end, surrounded by a family that had grown to include 4 children, 15 grandchildren, and 23 great-grandchildren by the time she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 79 in 1933. She was buried beside Yates, and their joint headstone bore a simple inscription that captured the essence of their entire relationship. Partners in life and love, it was always ours. The Sutherland Ranch continued to thrive for generations after them, managed by descendants who heard the story of how it all began with a presumptuous act of faith, and a deed that bore 2 names without permission or warning. That story became part of family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of the power of seeing potential where others saw only struggle, of offering partnership instead of charity, and of building something lasting through trust and love. The original deeds, those yellow documents that had started everything, were eventually preserved in a frame and hung in the ranch house's main room where everyone could see them. They served as a reminder to all who passed through that the foundation of the family's success was not just hard work or smart business decisions, but the partnership between 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed, even before they knew they needed it. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew across the prairie and the grass whispered its secrets, some of the older family members would swear they could still see 2 figures standing together at the old boundary line, a man and a woman side by side, looking out over the land they had built together. They would stand there hand in hand, eternal partners, still bound by the words that had defined their entire relationship and that echoed through the generations that followed. "It's ours. It will always be ours."